What's the best way to disappoint your parents? Spend 10 years in post secondary education, then quit your PhD 6 months before graduating. I want to start with a bold statement. Quitting my PhD was not a sign of failure, it was the most pivotal decision of my life. Imagine this: 5 years into my PhD, my career path seemed very clear, but deep down I knew something was off. And at the same time, the world of real estate investing was calling to me, offering a lifestyle of excitement and freedom, at least from the perspective of someone in their mid 20s. The decision to leave had a ton of risk, plus the guilt of disappointing my immigrant parents, all the years of study to this point in time, not to mention everyone else who thought I was crazy to abandon this career path. This video is not just about my story. It's an important message to anyone standing at your own crossroads of convention and passion between society's expectations of you and your dreams. Let's dive into why taking that leap can redefine success on your own terms. So like a lot of my videos, I'm going to give you a little bit of background, also to know me a little bit more, and also to, give you some context and tell you the story of why this happened. So, I was pretty lost. I had bad marks in high school. I actually didn't know what I wanted to do. I had friends that were a year or two older than me, and they had already gone into university and they were in engineering. And I loved creating things. I was kind of a nerd and a computer geek at the time and a gamer. So I thought, hey, I'll go into engineering, maybe some kind of computer engineering, mechanical, not quite sure. And so that's what I thought I was going to do when I was in grade 12. And then lo and behold, I was fooling around so much that I didn't make the required mark in math. I only got, I think, a 57, and I needed at least a 60 or a 65. So I couldn't get into engineering right from high school. So I decided that I would go into the Faculty of Science as a backup plan. Now, I was going to go into science, and then I was going to transition into year 2 in engineering. Well, it turns out that I didn't even have enough marks to be able to get into science. So then I settled for the next best, which was the Faculty of Arts. So year 1 in university, I go into the Faculty of Arts, and I'm taking my psychology and sociology and some science courses, pre-engineering courses, because I still intended on going from arts then directly into engineering. But then I discovered snooker, or billiards and pool, in our University Students Union building at the top floor. They had something called the club, which was basically a pool hall, and everybody would go there to hang out. Well, I got really good at pool and really bad at attending my classes, and I ended up failing a pre-engineering course. I think it was called Apply to Math. Okay, so my GPA in the first year of university was 1.5. So I did it to myself. Engineering was no longer an option. I couldn't even get into that faculty. So my backup plan then was a 4-year degree in science. I still didn't know what to do, but at least I could take what I had done in arts and then go into science, but that still had me held back at least a year. So I decided to major in microbiology in the Faculty of Science. I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And we're getting into the 4th year, and you really couldn't get much of a job with a BSc at the time. So in the 4th year, I decided to look at medical research, maybe get a PhD. Wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, if I wanted to be a professor, but I thought maybe that, or maybe going into pharmaceuticals. Wasn't quite sure. So the requirement to get into your graduate school at University of Manitoba was a 3.0 GPA in your last 2 years. Now, keep in mind, I was also going for this because I had that 1.5 in year 1. So basically, I'm like, okay, great. I just have to get a 3.0 in my last 2 years, take some easier courses, no problem. But there was that problem that I still liked playing pool. So I did not make the 3.0 GPA. I had a choice then. Do I stay on for another year and take some what they call rubber courses to get my GPA a little bit higher? I didn't really want to waste any more time, But there was a special clause in graduate school, at least at the Faculty of Medical Microbiology, where if I could convince somebody I was at least over a 2.5, so perhaps I could get special permission to, at least they would, like, I guess, waive the restrictions and let me into grad school. That's how low this was. I was basically begging to get back into school. So I'm applying to different, what they call principal investigators, somebody who would mentor me through the graduate program. And I remember meeting, going to this office, and, it was somebody who the professor was, I was interested in their research, but I wasn't quite sure. Obviously, just going there to see if we could have a conversation. And it ended up that she saw something on my resume that said I played piano for my entire life. I started playing piano when I was 4. And the entire conversation, that entire hour, was all about my piano, the competitions I've gone into, the medals that I've won throughout my entire life. I was quite dedicated to it. And it turned out that she was also a fan and thought that somebody who could make it through that type of training in piano would be a good graduate student. So she actually wrote me a letter that waived the restriction, and I was allowed to go into graduate school. I tell that story because you just never know what you're going to see or find on your resume. And sometimes it's just enough to start a conversation. So maybe you can take that one and write that down. So, okay, so let's go into grad school now. I'm in the 5th year of my PhD, and I'm 6 months away from graduating. I'm basically in the middle of my last graduate course. The thing is, you needed at this time to compete for an assistant professor, tenure track position at a university. It wasn't good enough to have a PhD, and it wasn't good enough to have one postdoctoral fellowships, one postdoc. Word was coming down that it was so competitive, and the NIH in the United States was graduating something like 1,200 PhDs every single year. And here we are up in Canada at University of Manitoba, and I'm sorry, that just doesn't compare to something like the National Institutes of Health. So I'm in the middle of my last graduate course, 6 months away from defending my thesis. I was also the president of the Students Association in our graduate school. And as part of that privilege, if you will, I was able to sit on the search committee for a candidate looking for the next assistant professor position in our department. So the leading contender was this professor she was already a professor from University of British Columbia, UBC, and her CV, her resume, was a mile long. She had first authors in the Journal of Science, biochemistry. I mean, just somebody that had so much experience. There's no way that I could even compete, going to be a new grad within 6 months, all competing for an assistant professor position that started at $36,000 per year. I mean, think of that. All right, so obviously very disillusioned, wasn't sure what I was going to do with my path. At the same time, I was also thinking of purchasing rental properties. Now, I had an intense interest in this. If you saw my other video of my dad passing away from cancer, I'll tell this story probably in another video, but we had a Chinese restaurant, and the story of how my dad got back into the family Chinese restaurant is really something. But the core of it that I remember is he ended up buying the building that his Chinese restaurant was renting from. And I'm like, how did he afford to do this? And I mean, I was young. I had no idea. Apparently, he had 2 C-class duplexes, and he'd had them for quite a few years. And they were tough. And, I don't even remember him going to pick up rent, to tell you the truth. I guess that's how much he shielded me from that. But he was able to trade these 2 duplexes to purchase the commercial building where our family Chinese restaurant was renting. I mean, it just blew my mind. And I was just thinking, what career path could I do where I could golf? I love to golf, where I could golf all day and carry a pager. And yes, this was quite some time ago. Wanted to carry a pager, and I did for quite a few years on my belt. So basically, I decided to withdraw from my PhD. I walked into my PhD advisor's office the next day and told her I just couldn't do this anymore. I'm just going to take a short segue here. As you know, I'm trying to grow this channel. So, to bring awareness to this and other business and career type conflicts that I'm talking about in this video, the best and only way is to tell YouTube to put this video in front of more people. And that only happens when you subscribe to the channel. So if you haven't already subscribed, please take a moment and click that red button over there. Thanks for helping. All right. So why did I quit? Well, if I were to stay, that meant at least 6 more years of school. Don't forget, I said not 1, but 2 postdoctoral fellowships. And the average for postdoc was about 3 years. So 6 more years of school. I'm already 27. I've been in post-secondary education for 10 years. Okay, so now think of the prospects of me being, let's say, 27 and 6, okay, 33 years old, to compete for a $36,000 a year job, not to mention the lost income potential for going to school for those 6 more years. So my slightly alternative path, what I thought I might do instead of the postdocs, was maybe the PhD, get an MBA, but then I needed 2 years of work experience and maybe work for big pharma, for pharmaceutical companies. But ultimately, I decided that real estate was the way I wanted to go. Again, got to carry that pager. So I needed to find a way and actually finance the first rental property that we bought with cash advances on our credit cards. That'll be a different story because that one is quite a feat. So let's talk about disappointment. My mom was actually more okay than I thought. She would always encourage me to find my dreams, whatever made me happy, as long as I made money at it. Dad was devastated. Maybe it was, I'm going to call it the Asian pride thing, being able to call his son a doctor because he was, a Chinese immigrant, came here when he was 10 without a word of English. We had so many fights about this. He hated every minute I was a real estate investor. And yet he helped me install doors. He helped me teach me how to paint on my first duplex while I was still learning. And then finally, 2 years later on his deathbed, he told me he was proud of my decision. So speaking of decisions, now we have to talk about backup plans. So I didn't just outright and quit. Yes, I quit my PhD, so I do not have a PhD to this day. But I decided to stay 6 more months to write my master's degree. Now, at University of Manitoba, just as some background, you have 2 options. You can go into a master's degree, which I did, graduate, get your MSc diploma, and then apply to a PhD program. However, if you are doing well and your research is complicated enough, you can do what's called a transition directly into a PhD program in the 3rd year of your master's degree. So that's actually what I ended up doing. So that's why I was in the 5th year of my PhD without having a master's degree. I went from master's program direct to PhD, never actually graduated from my master's. Now, I had just quit my PhD, and the work I was doing in my PhD was way too complicated for a master's thesis. But as a further backup plan, and I didn't want all those years to be a complete waste, I decided to put in 6 more months and write up what I had into a master's thesis, and then I graduated 6 months later with an MSc. So let's break my story down and see how I can help you gain some clarity in your own decisions. Let's break it down into 3 main questions. Number 1, assess your motivations and goals. Understand the real reasons behind your desire for a change. Are you seeking better job satisfaction, higher income, more work-life balance, or is it something else? It's crucial to ensure that your motivations align with your long-term goals and values. This reflection can help prevent making a change for the wrong reasons, such as temporary dissatisfaction or impulse. Consider what you are hoping to achieve with this change and whether it truly addresses your needs and aspirations. Number 2, research and prepare. Before making any drastic moves, research your intended new field thoroughly, understand the industry, the roles available, the skills required, and the typical career paths. You may need additional training, certifications, education. Evaluate the job market for your new career. Are there opportunities available? What are the typical salary ranges? Also, critically assess your own skills and experience. How do they transfer to your new field? Preparation can include networking with professionals in the field, attending relevant workshops of courses, or updating your resume to highlight transferable skills. And finally, number 3, financial and personal impact. Consider the financial implications of a career change. This might involve a temporary reduction in income, relocation expenses, or the cost of additional education. Ensure you have a financial plan to manage this transition without undue stress. Additionally, think about the personal and lifestyle impacts. How will this change affect your family, your daily routine, your personal well-being? It's important to have a support system and also to consider the broader implications on your life beyond work. On this last point, consider this. Yes, I quit my PhD to pursue a career in real estate, and I built up that portfolio from 0 to 43 buildings, 75 doors in 9 years. But I did it while working at the virology lab here in Winnipeg as a full-time, indeterminate scientific position with full benefits and pension. A job that I was able to get because I stuck around to write up my master's degree, because it gave me a stable income when the real estate portfolio was growing. And financial institutions loved that full-time employed status to grant me the mortgages on these rental properties versus trying to qualify as a self-employed individual. But the biggest reason I kept that job for all those years before officially becoming a full-time real estate investor, it was my backup plan. If real estate didn't work out, then I still had this job that paid me a decent salary and was guaranteed for life. So if you're struggling going to work every day and don't want to be stuck doing the same thing for the next 30 years, consider the last 3 points, and I hope I've helped bring some clarity to your own struggle. If you like this video, obviously give it a like and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And maybe you'll like this video as well.